the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Sup?
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a missing person case, an unsolved murder or kidnapping you may know something about, the name of your first pet and your mother's maiden name if we promise it's just for your protection. Anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837 or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, fully equipped with a pair of unicorn headphones and a Michael Bodden fan club soft drink tumbler, Melissa Morgan.
More Bella the cow. And yes, producer Mark, I am a huge fan of Michael Bodden. And if he came out with a soft drink tumbler, you bet your bippy I'd own one, or two, or seven.
You bet your bippy.
You bet your bippy, Mr. Man.
You know where that comes from, right?
Was it Laugh-In?
Yes, it was Dick Martin, man.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was a child and remember my, mom and my grandma and my grandpa just laughing. And I'm like, these people are weird.
Well, it was just, it was 1968 when it came on.
I was I was an infant.
Yeah. And
you bet your sweet Bippy.
And it was so scandalous because Bippy is not anything, but it just sounded dirty.
Well, it sounds like you bet your ass.
Yeah, right.
I'm guessing.
Or something.
Yeah.
Nobody quite knew what it meant, but, there were so many people who were offended by it. It was hilarious.
Oh, I didn't even realize it was a big thing. I just thought, okay.
Oh, yeah.
And Goldie Hawn dancing in a cage with a bikini and shit written on her body wasn't a big thing?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, okay. That was a very big thing.
Yeah. I was like, that seems a little more...
That was scandalous, too. That was
right.
Absolutely, yeah.
A little more scandalous than you bet your sweet Bippy.
Yes.
I don't even know where that came from. I was channeling Dick, the ghost of Dick Martin.
Me, the bird of paradise. Johnny Carson stole that from Laugh-In.
You bet your sweet Bippy?
No, you bet. May the sweet bird of paradise do whatever. They
fly up your nose or something?
Yeah, and they had lots of different things that they would say.
Oh, I didn't realize he stole that. Now I'm crushed.
Well, they're at the same studio in Burbank at the time.
Oh, okay. So it was more like incestuous thing.
Kinda.
Okay. Or maybe he loaned it to him.
All the youngster listeners to our podcast right now are going, what the hell are they
What's
talking about?
happening? Right. The grandma and grandpa are talking about back when they didn't have electricity and had to shit in the yard, although Mark pees sometimes outside. Like
You're never going to let that go, are you?
I'm really not. I'm going to bring it up every time I can.
Okay.
Every single time I can. And what was the first thing you said in the intro?
Oh, about the password protection?
Oh, yeah. That's a brilliant thing. I did not realize until you said it. You solidified it in my head for me that your password being your mother's maiden name and the first street you lived on is also your porn name.
Right.
So a password and if you just remember your porn name, I'll go first. Gypsy Mills.
Yeah, mine was Sam Halifax.
Sorry. I just blew a snot bubble out my nose because Sam Halifax is the worst stripper name in the world.
That's a decent porn name. Come on.
No. Sam Halifax. I wouldn't go see Sam Halifax for nothing if he paid me. Now, Gypsy Mills...
No, that's better. I
like
better.
That.
Way
I like
better.
That a lot.
Come on now.
Yeah. So I'm really grateful that you were able to supply that information that if you can remember your porn or stripper name, it probably will get you into a lot of things that you need a password for if you've forgotten your password. So I had never made that connection. I'm very proud of you and grateful for that information. If we do nothing here, it's that we educate on a weekly basis. We give you the kind of nuggets you need to get by in your life.
Or sometimes just little clumps of sand.
Okay.
That are helpful as well.
Like in your bathing suit that cause you to make a pearl in your asshole? What is with the clumps of sand?
Well, you said we give nuggets, and I just think sometimes they're little clumps of sand.
A nugget is like a piece of information oh my God. All right. Now I'm done with you. So a little housekeeping up front. If you have a moment, if you could go to iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast and rate or review, we would be very grateful. You can subscribe too, which would make us very happy. If you have information on a case or a case you want us to cover, please feel free to call us at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or you can email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. And I also have a new sponsor to welcome this week. We want to welcome ARP. If you're worried about your family being safe, know that ARP provides real security. ARP, or Asshole Retired People, is a Fortune 5 million company that's dedicated to your safety.
Is it?
With ARP services, you can sign up online through fax or carrier pigeon. There's no long-term contract. You can cancel at any time, and all the services are guaranteed. And there's many levels of service and security offered. ARP sends a grumpy retired person to your home. Some of them will stay in their own cars conspicuously parked in front of your home. Some of them may nap in your shrubs. But be assured, whichever level of plan you sign up for, if someone approaches your home or your family, one of our qualified ARP representatives will approach that stranger and scream, "Get off of their lawn!" And if that doesn't deter the most hardened of burglars, the ARP patented old person smell will drive away any ne'er-do-weller. Either way, you're protected. So to sign up, head on over to arp.hotmail.gov.edu.org.noteven and enter promo code TIPSTERLOVE for a 9.5% discount on your first month of service. ARP. With asshole retired people, you're always being watched and judged.
And there's another one I had. I guess you're out really out scouring the landscape for new sponsors.
I am hoofing it, brother. I'm hoofing around getting all sorts of sponsors.
Yeah. Now that's great. I hope that, it may not have been the smartest name because it's very similar to another organization that some people in our listening audience might call up.
Okay, well, you know what?
Can I get your service? Your security service?
I was just kidding. It's not real.
Oh, okay.
It's not a real sponsor.
Oh, really?
No,
okay.
It's not.
All right.
I'm a terrible person. So, speaking of being a terrible person, and I did the thing I always yell at you about, I just sniffed. But the sinus issues in this spring in Southern California are abysmal. And instead of, I already blew a snot bubble out my nose when you made me laugh, and now I'm sniffing, and I'm hoping you're just going to be able to look over me. So this story was sent to us by the fantastic Tipster Alex, who is an artist, a musician, a yogi, a Renaissance man, and a brilliant, intelligent guy who has had this case in his head. He is a California native, so it stuck with him. And when he sent it to me, at first I thought, oh, that seems odd. Why would this stick with Alex? But oh boy, it's a really fascinating case, and I really didn't know how far down the rabbit hole I would go. When you hear about something like this, a jewelry store robbery, you think, oh, that's going to be pretty cut and dry, I'm going to guess. No, this is a really layered, fascinating story. And whether Alex knows it or not, this story that he sent me to cover solidified something in my mind that it's taken a long time for me to get there. And I get it now. And it took this story for me to get there. But this is the case of the Van Cleef and Arpels robbery and murders in Beverly Hills in 1986. So on Tuesday, June 24th of 1986, right around 10 a.m. opening time of the amazing and long storied Van Cleef and Arpels jewelry store, an employee buzzed in a well-dressed man thinking that he was a customer. And it turned out it was 22-year-old Steven Livaditis, and he was not a customer. He was a real asshole. And he had been linked to a robbery in Las Vegas 4 months earlier, and he wore the same gray suit then that he wore into Van Cleef and Arpels that day in June in 1986. Now, a little history of Van Cleef and Arpels. Two jewelry designers in France in the 1800s came up with new designs for precious gems that are so unique, they've actually named settings after their work. There's something called a mysterious setting, and it somehow holds the stone and makes the prongs invisible. I don't know. I mean, these are true artisans when it comes to making jewelry, and they weren't small, delicate pieces. They were typically large. They could have been considered gaudy, but somehow they never stepped over the line into gaudy. They could look potentially not real because of the size of the gems, but they were all real, the highest quality gems. You see them all over famous people on red carpets. They've been around for 140 years now. I mean, a really long history, storied company with exquisite designs. I remember being, a kid in Kentucky, and we weren't fancy. We didn't have the money to be fancy, but my mom was classy. So what money we did have, she's the kind of person who would buy one nice purse and have that last her for a long time. And I was the kid that she probably wished she could have traded in, because I was like, if one purse is good, 10 purses are great. So I would buy like 10 cheap purses.
No, you're not like that at all.
You shut the fuck up. So I would buy 10 cheap purses and the straps would break. And my mom would be like, if you would have just saved your money and bought this one nice leather purse. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So obviously we had no Van Cleef and Arpels jewelry in our home, but I do remember, a little girl looking through magazines and dreaming like, wow. I mean, because their ads are breathtaking, beautiful models. And one of the things I do remember is that obviously you're not going to have a 20-year-old wearing a big, giant, gorgeous piece of jewelry. They used more mature models because they obviously were people who could afford giant pieces of
that's interesting.
Of exquisite jewelry. I remember being a kid.
That's very smart, actually.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, I was a kid, a teenager, looking through fashion magazines and like, oh. I mean, it subconsciously lent itself to, if you're a young person with a lot of money, God bless you. But it was like, this is the kind of advertising aimed at a more mature person with, a shitload of money. Typically, you've made a lot more money as you get older, but, that's not always true. But I did always love their advertising. So Steven Livaditis, 22 years old, and I wonder what compels a 22-year-old man to do this. But he walks into the store shortly after opening, which is apparently what you want to do. Maybe not a lot of people. Maybe the employees haven't gotten into their groove yet and they're off balance. It just seems like right around opening time is when a bank robber, a jewelry store, burglar wants to start their game. So he wears this lovely gray suit, carries an attaché case, and an employee buzzed him in. Obviously, even in 1986, this is a store where you don't just walk in off the street wearing your flip-flops. Somebody's got to size you up and buzz you in. So an employee buzzed in Steven Livaditis in his lovely gray suit and his attaché case. Once he gets inside, and the employee who buzzed him in said there was really nothing that looked unusual. This just did not look like an unusual thing. It was a well-dressed man with an attaché. He opens up the case, and there's a nickel-plated .357 Magnum revolver, rolls of heavy tape, cord, backup ammunition, a survival knife, and a switchblade. And he starts. Whoa. Yeah, he came. He didn't come to play. He came to win.
Whoa!
He started screaming over and over again. Everybody get on the floor. Everybody get on the floor. Just over and over again. 10 employees. And I know that Mark, as a risk manager, has gone through this sort of active shooter training, which I think is really a fantastic thing that local police agencies and areas do. They offer, actual police officers to come to your business and go through active shooter training. 10 employees did what the first thing they tell you to do is they ran. So, it's not a brilliant plan, but it's one that works. It's run if you can, hide if you can't run, and then fight if it turns out that you are confronted with a shooter. And hopefully one of those things you're able to do and you're able to survive. So 10 employees scattered and ran. He immediately took 5 hostages. The bookkeeper, before she fled, was able to trip a silent alarm, and another employee had managed to dial 911.
So the ones who ran got out of the store?
Yep. So he has 5 hostages in the store. 10 have managed to escape. And before he knows it, it's Beverly Hills. Remember, it's Rodeo Drive. There are 80 officers surrounding the building in minutes. Now, he seems surprised and thinks he is going to get some shit and get the fuck out. He's on his way out of the store, and he sees the amount of officers and he runs back in, which is his mistake and everyone else's mistake because he manages to do a lot of damage. So he takes his 5 hostages back, and it starts a 13-and-a-half-hour event. So he makes 2 requests during the entire time. He talks to a negotiator, and he says he wants food delivered, and he wants a TV news crew to interview him.
What?
Yep.
Jeez, I vaguely remember this, but I don't remember that. Wow.
Now, it made news across the country because the newspaper clips, a lot of what I got was from the Los Angeles Times, but there was actually really great coverage from the New York Times. It made the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Tribune. It went across the country. And I did not live in California until 1992, so I did not remember this at all. A lot of things escape your mind, maybe unless there's something that really holds your interest, and probably a jewelry store robbery in Beverly Hills was off my radar in 1986. So we're going to go backwards 4 months. Steven Livaditis is living in Las Vegas. On Sunday, February 2nd of 1986, he used the same MO that he used in the Van Cleef and Arpels robbery, and he wore the same gray suit. And he confronted 2 employees of Azale's Jewelers in a shopping center about 2 miles south of the Vegas Strip. So he entered right after opening, a little bit after 10 a.m. He's got on the same gray suit. He shows the employees his revolver. He binds them and puts them in the back room, and he flees with $250,000 in merchandise.
Jeez, you think that'd be enough to last him a while?
You would think. You would think. So the Las Vegas police show the employees a lineup, and both of the employees that have been bound identify him. And he was already on the, Las Vegas Metro's radar because in September of 1984, he had robbed a computer store of $22,000 worth of equipment, and he had attempted to resell it. So he was arrested when he was reselling this equipment. So that was his start small. And just remember, at that time in 1984, he's 20. He's a 20-year-old Greek national, and he stole $22,000 worth of equipment from a computer store and then gets caught reselling it. So he's arrested, and he does a short jail term, and then he's given 5 years of probation. But after a while, he fails to show up for his probation check-ins, so he's placed on something called an absconder status, which I've never heard of. But right about the time of the Zales robbery in 86. That's when he's kind of just given up going to probation and checking in. So he's put on the absconder status. So he robs the Zales store in February of 1986, and he makes his way pretty quickly to Los Angeles. And he signs a lease on an apartment in Hollywood in March of 1986 on Franklin Avenue.
Ah, my old street.
Exactly. It's a pretty famous street in Los Angeles for those of you who live here, and those of you who don't. It's a is it a east-west street?
Yeah, east-west. Yeah.
It's a big one. I mean, it's a big long street it's like a main artery through a lot of crappy Hollywood traffic.
Yeah, it's about a block and a half north of Hollywood Boulevard.
Right, exactly. It has, entrances to the 101 freeway. It's a pretty convenient street. So I know you had lived there on Franklin, and you lived in the 6500 block.
I lived in the 6600 block.
6600 block. So Steven Livaditis lived in the 7000.
Oh, so he lived west of
5 blocks
west of Highland. So he lived close to the Magic Castle.
Okay. He lived 5 blocks from you. And I'd lived on the corner of Franklin and Edgemont for 3 years. Like I said, it's a very storied street. So he lived in this apartment in the 7000 block of Franklin for just a few months. And he didn't pay rent his last month. He left voluntarily so that he wasn't evicted. And he had no friends there. Everyone who lived in the building said he was unfriendly. He wouldn't make eye contact in the hallway. He always had someone with him, typically other men, and they always spoke in Greek to each other. So that's a good way to isolate yourself. And the landlord was like, he only came out at night. He was like a mole. He, stayed home during the day and only came out at night. So that's a really good description of a.
Yeah, that's something that would probably alert just about everybody in the building, I would think.
Yeah. So Steven Livaditis was actually stopped by police on May 19th on Rodeo Drive in front of Van Cleef and Arpels. He had made an abrupt lane change, and he nearly caused 2 accidents. So they stopped him and ticketed him. And of course, now they think what he was doing was casing the jewelry store, and saw the police and freaked out and tried to get away.
Wow.
Now, in hindsight, of course, there's a lot about this case that hindsight 2020, but man, oh man, what the chain of events that this piece of shit started, the lives he altered forever. I messaged Tipster Alex and was like, thanks a lot, pal. This story is killing me here. So obviously when he asks for food and a news crew, the police are not going to send a news crew into a hostage situation. But they do offer to send him in a camera and a television so that he can film himself and see himself, because they get immediately that he's just a fucking narcissist. Just a narcissist. So he kills the security guard almost immediately. William Smith, age 54. Oh, this just breaks my heart. He stabbed him in the back because Livaditis said he was not listening to his instructions. So,
wow.
He has a phone conversation with someone from UPI, which is United Press International. And there's a partial transcript of the communication. So Livaditis says, my intention was to take jewelry and leave and nobody get hurt, but it didn't turn out that way. And UPI says, what happened? He says, well, I looked out the window and saw the police officers in front of the store. And then what happened? Well, and then I took hostages. And who did you take hostage? I took 3 men and 2 women, all employees of Van Cleef and Arpels. Where are they now? Well, 2 of the men are alive and well, and 1 man is dead. How did he die? I murdered him.
He said I murdered him.
I murdered him.
Good grief.
How did you do that? I stabbed him. How long ago did you do that? Oh, I don't know, approximately. How long ago was it? Asking the other hostages. Half an hour? 3/4 of an hour?
Oh my God.
Can you describe what led up to that incident? He was the security guard here, and he was talking back to me. I told him to keep his mouth shut, and he kept talking, so I killed him. Can you describe how you killed him? I stabbed him in the back. Do you regret that now? Do I regret it? Absolutely not. I do not regret it. It was the appropriate thing to do at the time. He failed to obey my orders, and my orders were to not say anything and he couldn't keep his mouth shut.
Wow. That's just... Oh.
I wondered if he stabbed the security guard immediately, like the old phrase, hang a nun in the courtyard, to keep everyone quiet and let them know he means business.
Oh, well, I'm sure.
I mean, he said, that was not my intention. I was just going to grab some jewelry and leave. Yeah.
Whether that was his intent or not, I'm sure it worked.
Yeah. So he calls a local television station in Los Angeles, KTLA, Channel 5. He calls them 3 times. Finally, there's a transcription of one of the conversations that he has with them. And he says, I didn't intend for this to happen, but it's happening right now. I didn't come in here with the intention of hurting anyone. I came here to grab some jewelry, and the next thing I know, the police are outside and across the street. KTLA says, and what have you done with Mr. Smith's body? And that's William Richard Smith, the security guard. Livaditis says, Mr. Smith's body is lying here approximately 3 feet away from me. He's been dead for several hours. KTLA says, why do you want the television? Livaditis says, I'll make a statement when I'm on the air. I want it taped and put on television and aired at a later date, and I'd like to be put on television live. That's one of my demands. What would it take is what KTLA, the representative, is trying to say. And he interrupts them and says, one man has died already, and I'll execute somebody else. And KTLA says, when? And he says, within the next few minutes. And KTLA says, the next few minutes? And he says, yes. And they say, what can we do to prevent that from happening? And he says, this is final. There is absolutely nothing you can do to prevent me from doing this unless I see a TV camera crew outside the door coming in right now. And KTLA says, can we bring this to a peaceful end by sending you a TV camera and a TV set? And he says, sure, that's right. I want to see myself on network television live. And then he shoots Ann Halpern in the back of the head, age 40, an employee and salesperson of Van Cleef and Arpels, and kills her.
This is a nightmare.
It's beyond a nightmare. It's beyond a nightmare. So one of his demands was met. There was a bag with bread and bologna and cold drinks that was left in front of the entrance, but it goes untouched. The entire time, police and SWAT are not really believing he's killed anyone. They say that he changed his story with negotiators several times. I killed people. I didn't kill people. He denies it. They thought he was bluffing. Now, I'm going to say this, and I don't want to disparage anyone, because obviously the way this happened, it isn't the first time. It won't be the last time. But it really did not go well. It did not go well at all. And I'm not saying that the hostage negotiator should find another job. Actually, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm just going to say the hostage negotiator should get into another field of endeavors, because the hostage negotiator kept saying he's bluffing. He's bluffing. He's not going to kill anyone, and he hasn't killed anyone. And there are 2 people in there that have been dead for hours. This is a 13-and-a-half-hour standoff. So Sheriff Sherman Block at the time and the Beverly Hills Police Chief of Police Marvin Ionine are trying to figure out what the best way to get in there. And obviously, it's a tough situation. It's a highly secured building. It's a very high-end jewelry store. It isn't a jewelry store at the mall. And not that there's anything wrong with jewelry stores at the mall, but it's not a kiosk where you get your ears pierced. It's Van Cleef and fucking Arpels, for God's sake. And they know that it's a very almost impenetrable building. Even in 1986, it's still pretty impenetrable. So they thought about busting in the front door. They thought about getting a battering ram for the front door as a distraction, and then using a tractor with a heavy shovel in the back through the parking lot that's owned by the city of Beverly Hills, and they were going to try and break through the back of the store. They thought about a stealthy entry through the roof, but were saving that in case they thought any hostages were really in danger of being harmed, which they already were. Now, here's step one that bothers me greatly. 2 of the hostages spoke to the negotiators and said, yes, 2 hostages have already been killed. And the negotiators said they were too unemotional. And that...
What?
Yeah. They were too unemotional. And that they were... And I got to be honest, I don't know enough about this to speak to it, but I can tell you what little I do know. I don't believe you can become immersed in Stockholm Syndrome in 5 minutes. It's typically something that takes time if you're, being held hostage. But within hours, the negotiators said, I think the hostages are suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, and they're just going to say whatever Livaditis tells them to say.
What the hell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the negotiator told the SWAT team, if any of the hostages had actually been killed, the ones that are talking with us would have expressed more emotion.
That's just
heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking. Right. And I'll just, spoiler alert, it goes downhill from here. So with an open phone line, they're actually able to hear some of the conversations between Livaditis and the hostages. And they said he spoke to them very oddly, like asking their opinion. And it sounded like he was an employer discussing issues with his staff. Like he would turn to the hostages and then talk to them, and there would be an exchange back and forth, a conversation between he and the hostages. It was just...
That's bizarre.
It is very bizarre. So 13 and a half hours later, well, I guess 12 and a half hours later, about an hour before he attempts to escape at 11:30 p.m., at about 10:30 p.m., the hostages are actually helping him fashion bindings that can hold them all together. So he ties the hostages and himself all together and then puts, as I'm sure you've probably seen in jewelry stores, even at the mall, they'll have typically a black velvet blanket or covering over a display case because obviously jewelry shows up under those fluorescent lights much more sparkly and shiny if they're showcased on a black velvet, cover or blanket or, scarf. So he covers himself and the hostages with the black blanket and ties them all together. And he's trying to escape with them. So he's got the shipping clerk and another male employee and a female employee. So there's 3 men and a female. And there's actually a 4th man, but he got separated from the group. And this is the part that is just heartbreaking. It's the store manager, and his name is Hugh Skinner. And what they believe happened is that he was ordered to change pants with Steven Livaditis. So now he's wearing the gray suit pants. And Steven Livaditis is wearing Hugh Skinner's black pants.
Oh, no.
Uh-huh. And a series of really unfortunate events that unfold. Hugh Skinner, 64, manager of the Van Cleef and Arpels for 20 years, is separated from the group. And he is shot and killed by a bullet fired from a member of the sheriff's special weapons team because he was mistaken for the suspect. He was shot in the chest, one shot, by a sharpshooter on a rooftop across the street.
How did that work? Did the suspect tell him to go out the store or something in the slacks, in the gray slacks?
I think that it was he had changed clothes with him and covered all of them except for Mr. Skinner, who fell behind It just was a horrible series of terrible things. So he had covered the top of them so that the other two men and himself could not be identified, and the female. So they wouldn't shoot the female. They don't know who the three men are under the blanket. And Mr. Skinner is separated. It's just a terrible mistake on every level. Everything bad that could happen. Mr. Skinner is separated from the group. A spotter, Deputy John Rhodes, says he's got a gun, he's going to shoot. Deputy George Johnson, a 13-year vet, fired one shot, a rifle shot from 100 yards away, got him in the chest, and they found nothing that would have alerted the spotter that he had a gun. They don't know if it was a watch, a ring, a light, something shown in Mr. Skinner's hand, according to the spotter. I just feel like it was a pressure-filled situation.
Yep, it was all adrenaline.
Yep,
and
gray pants, and yep. The hostages that it made it out had said he's wearing a gray suit. I just think it was a horrible series of just terrible things that happened all at once. It breaks my heart in half, and I understand why Tipster Alex has held on to this story.
Oh yeah,
for all these years. So Mr. Skinner was really well known in the neighborhood. He had lived there for a long time. He'd lived very close to the store in West Hollywood. He had managed that Van Cleef and Arpels for 20 years. He's 64 years old and was apparently beloved in the neighborhood. A woman who ran a flower shop a couple of doors down from Van Cleef and Arpels was on her way to have a bracelet fixed that Mr. Skinner promised her he would fix for her. And if she had gone a little earlier, she would have been one of the hostages. She left a beautiful candle and flowers in front of the store saying, "I'm praying for the innocents that did not need to die." And she's right. So it's like 11:30 p.m. He tries the escape. They threw a flashbang into the store, and he is trying to run out the back, covered with the blanket with the hostages. He lays on the ground and pretends to be shot. And when they get to them, they quickly find that he has a revolver hidden under his body. So they're lucky they weren't killed right then. He's got a briefcase that's filled with watches, jewelry, loose gems. It's worth about $2 million, what he could fit into his attaché case. The other two employees were hospitalized for burns from a flashbang that they had thrown in, and the other male employee that wasn't burned was hospitalized because he was the shipping employee, Robert Taylor, and he complained of chest pains. I'm sure he was under a lot of stress, but he was released the next day. So Livaditis pleads guilty in 1987 to 3 counts of murder, along with special circumstance allegations. So it made him eligible for the death penalty. And of course, the charges of robbery, kidnapping, and burglary. So he's sentenced to death on July 8th of 1987. He's 55 years old. He is in San Quentin he is in San Quentin prison on death row.
Oh, you mean today? He's alive at 55 years old.
Yeah. He was 22.
That's what I'm saying. You said he's 55. How did he get from 22 to 55? You're saying he's alive still.
Yeah. He's on death row in San Quentin. He's inmate D61400. And D literally has to stand for dick. He has a dick nose on his face. It's huge. It looks like a penis. And he has a real dick brain. And he wants to talk about what he did and talk about, how it could have gone so much better. And I don't want to give him 1 ounce of being right, because he is right. It was a terrible thing. It's reminiscent of the most recent thing I can think of, which is the man who tried to kill his grandmother and lost his shit and drove his car into a Trader Joe's in Silver Lake and took hostages, and the one person killed was the manager of the Trader Joe's, and she was killed by friendly fire. And I hate to use that term, but a police sharpshooter killed her. And it's that collateral damage also, just that term just gets me. And the thing is, Mr. Livaditis didn't kill the manager of Van Cleef and Arpels himself, but yet he did.
Oh, he absolutely did.
There would be absolutely no reason for Hugh Skinner to be dead if it weren't for Steven Livaditis and his greed, wish to be famous. I don't even know. I don't even know what to call this. But I can tell you this case is sticking with me, and I am a eye for an eye girl. And producer Mark and I and some other friends of ours, Paul Zolo, who's been a guest on the show, have had discussions about the death penalty. Our present Governor Gavin Newsom, has not halted the death penalty in California, but he has paused it. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't. I have always believed if you murder someone, you don't get to live and have a great life. You should not be able to live and have a great life it's not a great life if they catch you anyway. It's not a great life in prison, but you don't get to breathe air. You don't get to get up and be fed and sleep and exercise in the yard and hopefully get shivved in the shower. You don't get those things. You shouldn't get those things, is how I thought. And it's taken this case for me to get it. I understand the number of people that may be innocent that have been executed. That's the main reason why I'm definitely changing my mind about the death penalty. But this is what felt like a slap in the face and woke me up. So I really thank Tipster Alex for this. So a Loyola Law School professor, Paula Mitchell, said, "We need to stop throwing good money after bad and admit that the system is broken. And the only solution is to replace the death penalty with life without the possibility of parole, reducing taxpayer-financed appeals by 80%, and ensuring that the state will never execute an innocent person." And she says, "We can invest the savings in education and effective crime prevention programs." And it never sunk in until just now. I kept thinking, well, how is it more money to have someone be given the death penalty than to have them live forever in a cell and we pay for them? And because of our broken legal system, because of the amount of money spent on appeals, on attorneys, it never sunk in till just now. I have had discussions with tipster Tanya and her husband John about the death penalty not existing in Canada, and me being very angry at people who get 20 years for a murder. But if our system could somehow be revamped, restructured, rejiggered to someone who does something as awful as Steven Livaditis did, and he is directly responsible for not only William Smith and Ann Halperin, but Hugh Skinner, directly responsible for that murder that should not have happened. If he could stay in prison for life and never ever have an option of getting out, I would be fine with that. And I'm rethinking my hardline stance, and I get it now. So thank you, Tipster Alex. Thank you, producer Mark. Thank you to all of my intelligent, compassionate listeners. And more cowbell.
And remember, if you've got a tip, give us a call, 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com.